Hello, and welcome to Grade.com Talks With. Today, we're talking with Dr. Sterling Burnett, Senior Fellow and Managing Editor of Environment and Climate News at Heartland Institute, an organization whose mission is to discover, develop, and promote free market solutions to social and economic problems. And if you're new to our podcast, please press subscribe button either on YouTube or your podcast app, because today we're going to learn about an organization that is fighting for more individual liberty and smaller government. Hello, Dr. Sterling Burnett. Welcome to Grade.com Talks. We're excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be on and reach new audiences.
Wonderful. Could you please describe the work that you do at Heartland Institute for someone who is not familiar with your work?
My work in particular, or Heartland Institute's work in general?
Heartland Institute.
Yes, the Heartland Institute is based in, used to be in Chicago, Illinois. We've been around for 37 years. We're a nonprofit educational organization. We don't do lobbying. We work on discovering and promoting market solutions to difficult social and economic problems. We focus most of our work on domestic issues, but because international policy can affect domestic policy and domestic policy can affect international policy, we do a modicum of work on international issues. Most of our work is on economic issues. We cover a range of topics. I happen to work on environment, energy, and climate issues, but we have people in our organization that work on healthcare, that work on budget and tax issues. We work on big tech, information technology, property issues. We stay mostly away from the controversial social issues. If it's got an economic take, then we work on it. We are unique with some organizations in the United States. I can't speak to how organizations internationally work, but we are based in Illinois, not in Washington, D.C. And so we do deal with national issues, but we also have a strong presence in all 50 states. So we have a government relations portion of our organization that interacts with state legislators and state agencies on a regular basis. So we testify all around the country, both written and in person. We have thousands of contacts every year with state legislators. We have 300 state legislators that actually pay to get to be a part of what we call our legislative forum. So they come to events, and we basically critique proposed legislation and existing legislation, and propose. If we think it's pretty good, we might propose improvements. If we think it's bad, we might say, here's an alternative. So that's, I guess, a general overview. We have about 7,000 donors. It's more than 70% of them are individuals. We get about 22% of our income from foundations, grant-making foundations. And then we have a small percent from corporations, but nobody provides more than 5% of our revenue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. You mentioned the range of and the scope of work and the topics that you work on researching and educating both public and policymakers is quite extentful, including healthcare, climate, as well as all the economic problems that may encounter. And you indeed critique and suggest solutions and work closely with policymakers to make a change for a better economic situation, both on a national level as well as international level. As you mentioned, they can be interrelated. Right. As your organization is focusing on free market solutions, could you please describe the free market economy and the impact of it on the solving social and economic problems?
Well, what's interesting is even Karl Marx, who is known as the father of communism, he recognized the virtues of the market. He said, before we can reach the communist stage, we have to have the market stage. He believed in sort of this historical development that was inevitable. Now, I don't happen to agree with his analysis of history being inevitable, and markets being a stage. But he did recognize that markets make societies wealthy. They produce goods and services uniquely well, satisfying people's desires. And so we think that people should have freedom, that they have a right to autonomy, to deciding for themselves how they ought to live, and that markets provide the wealth and goods and services better than other forms of economic development to satisfy people's myriad choices. We don't live the same way. We don't want the same things. And the idea that there's some elite that knows best how everybody ought to live, that we all have to live one way, and there's somebody that actually knows what that one way is, we just don't believe that.
Yes, as you mentioned, capitalism and free market economy is about the choice. In this market, in this economy, everyone is supposed to have their own choice and fight their own choice and have the limited options rather than, as mentioned by you, a certain individual or a light group deciding for the whole economy, for the whole country or society on the choices, on the actions, on the activities they are supposed to have. So there are... and
it also turns out that freedom of this type makes societies wealthier faster than any other economic system. Mm-hmm. And wealth means, in general, longer lives, less infant mortality, in general, better nutrition, fewer people going hungry. Basically, it turns out that market economies make life better for most people than they would have been absent the market. And you can do cross-cultural comparisons, cross-country comparisons of what it is or was like behind former Iron Curtain countries. You can compare their environments to Western environments. You can compare their standards of living and their lifespans, their levels of infant mortality. So basically, markets allow people to exercise their freedom better. And in the process, it also, development makes people's lives better.
Mm-hmm. Certainly, there's not as there are several indicators of wealth, as mentioned by you. It's not only about the money; it's about the freedom. It's about life expectancy, about the quality of life, quality of food, and we can see that although United States might be a young country, 300 years, less than 300 years, but with this free economy, it was able to become one of the wealthiest nations as well as one of the leading nations, and it indicates that.
Education. You can look at education levels. You can look at female empowerment in countries that have markets versus countries that are more closed. There's no society or country that doesn't have problems. There's no question about that. As long as human beings are, as opposed to robots or some kind of perfect being. Every society will have problems. There's always room for improvement. But it turns out in general, Western, I say Western, but that's just because they happen to be the ones that adopted market economies. Had Eastern societies adopted markets earlier, had they had enforceable property rights earlier for private individuals, they would be where we are probably or ahead. And in fact, as they allow markets and property rights, they're seeing massive development, right? So,
yes, indeed. And Heartland Institute plays an essential role in the movement for personal liberty and limited government. Could you please tell us about this movement and why having a limited government is important for personal liberty?
Well, government is force. Government is it claims for itself the exclusive right to the use of legitimate force within a geographic region. That's what government is. Be it the Dallas city government, the Texas government. I happen to be in Texas and in Dallas, or a suburb of, or the United States government. Within its borders, it claims the right to adjudicate disputes, and to lay down laws that people should follow, and to police those laws. But it's not, in general, voluntary. You don't get to pick and choose which laws you obey. And so government is force. And the greater the government, the larger the government, the less scope for individual freedom and action and choice. Every law restricts something. Mm-hmm. Every regulation tells somebody what they can or cannot do in one way or the other. So the larger the government, the more laws, the more regulations, the less scope of free action for individuals. Mm-hmm. And so if it so happens, market economies have a larger range of choice for individuals. What markets do is free exchange. I want something, and I go out and I convince somebody to give me that something, whether it's for money, for trade, for labor, for whatever it is. What I don't get to do, however, is I want something and I get to take a gun or a knife or say, give this to me or else. Nor do I get to force someone to do something for me in a market economy. I get to persuade them or entice them through money or trade or whatever else. Government, when it wants something, it can entice, but quite often what it does is it takes from one group of people and gives to another group of people to encourage it. Or it just says, we want you to do this, and so we're outlawing anything but this. That's not freedom. Government is not persuasion, it is force. Mm-hmm. The IRS doesn't ask whether you want to pay your taxes. It says pay your taxes or else. Mm-hmm. And there may be a realm, a justification for that force to keep order, for people who may want to take advantage of other people and use force on them to protect you from them. But like I said, the larger the realm of government action, the greater intervention in people's lives, telling them what they can or can't do, what they can or can't make, what they can or can't buy or sell, how they can or cannot use their property. Every new rule or regulation restricts somebody's freedom.
Mm-hmm. That's quite an interesting analogy, that having a limited government will enable more people to exercise their rights, to exercise their freedom, as long as it's in the scope of not violence, as long as it's not in the scope of pressuring someone, and just making sure the peace is there. And if it's to that extent, you can exercise your rights and you can exercise your freedom without hurting someone or without harming them, without taking away someone else's life. And as we discussed earlier, that you work closely with state elected officials. In 2018 survey done, 45% of state elected officials said that Heartland publication influenced their opinions or led to a change in public policy. Could you please tell us more in detail how you work with state elected officials and how you inform them about the public view on policies that they are proposing?
Well, we do it through a variety of ways. We examine particular states' proposed laws and regulations on a range of issues, and we do analyses of these. The economic impact, the impact on people's freedom of choice, whether it will create or destroy jobs, whether it's just a wealth transfer. So if you pass a law that says you will use this type of energy and not that type of energy, basically what happens is you're transferring wealth from one group of politically connected people to the people that existed beforehand. How do we communicate with them? Well, we have a government relations staff that is in constant communication, both on the phone and through email, increasingly common, email, texting, whatever. We also publish newspapers that go to every state legislator. There's a reason why I think 80%, the same poll showed over 80% at least have read our newspapers. 40% have actually been persuaded by something we've written in our newspapers to have changed their mind. That's pretty impactful, I think. There are organizations in all 50 states, I believe that's the case, who fight for free markets within that state. So in Texas, we have something called the Texas Public Policy Foundation. In Louisiana, they have the Heartland Institute, just as examples. So, but they focus just on that state. We cover 50 states, and we cover the federal government. Now, it's hard to do. We've got a limited budget. We've got limited staff, but we do it, and we do it pretty well. It's not the case that we cover every law or every regulation. We have limited our scope to largely economic. Like I said, we stay away from sort of controversial social issues. That's not our expertise. Even among the economic, we can only cover so many issues. My particular realm of expertise and experience is environment, but environment is a huge realm. There's clean air, there's clean water, there's solid waste, there's species, there's land issues, public land issues, state, private land issues. There is climate change. There is energy development and use. There are, there's mining, there's wind and solar development. So there are a lot of things that technically fall within my
expertise.
Well, my realm of expertise, but it's not the case that I can cover all of them all the time. There are some people that specialize in clean air issues. They really know that issue. I can't say that I really, really know that issue, but I know the people who do know that issue. So I consult with them when I'm going to work on a topic. And that's one thing we do is we write news stories and we go to experts. We say, what is your take on this law, this proposed law, the existing law? What, is it doing good? Is it doing bad? I don't know that, but they know that. And so we have, I think we have over 500 policy advisors, people that we go to for quotes on stories, for guidance on issues in academia, in government, in the private sector.
Yeah, essentially, you are a bridge between policy experts and public opinion and the policymakers. So you analyze, consult with experts and make publications, write news about them. And essentially, 80% of state elected officials read them, and 45% make decisions based on what they have read on Heartland Institute publications. And you are actually an action tank as well as a think tank. And
that's right.
Could you please tell us about a recent work, especially in your area of expertise, that made an impact?
Before COVID hit, last year, things were different. Certainly in the United States, I assume where you're at as well. To some extent, everything became virtual. But 2 years ago, the year before COVID, I testified in Congress about laws concerning whether we should be testing oil, doing surveys of oil and gas offshore and what its impact might be on whales. we have promoted, it's not in my area of expertise, but we're promoting a market-oriented health plan proposal to replace the government plan that came about during the Obama administration, but because it would improve upon it, not because we don't think people should have health care, but because we think there are better ways to provide people health care and better health care, ways which, in fact, remove layers of bureaucracy between them and healthcare providers so they can make more informed choices as opposed to insurers or government making choices for them.
Mm-hmm. Wow, your testimony in Congress, it sure helped, I assume, policymakers in making a better decision for the environment, as well as the finding a better way of testing. And I believe your contribution was essential in that particular matter. If someone would like to support Heartland Institute, how can they do that?
Well, they go to www.heartland.org and sign up under support. Go find out about us. Sign up for one of our newsletters or newspapers. They're free online. And if you want the print edition, it's a minimal subscription for the newspapers. Not everything we publish is print, but I publish 3 times a month generally, something called Climate Change Weekly. It's called weekly, but I can't do it for 4 weeks a month. 3 weeks a month, I publish something called Climate Change Weekly that's online only. You can either view it on our website or you can actually have it sent to you. Just sign up for it. But we have a variety of publications like that. And we encourage people to go there. Listen to our podcast. We have podcasts daily. We have, I don't know how many podcasts we have done over the years. I personally have done 320 podcasts since I've been here. And that's one person in one small area, the environment, not a small area, but on the environmental issues. But we also have people doing podcasts on healthcare, on law, we now have a book series of podcasts where we have a person who weekly talks to an author of a recent book that may not be policy oriented, could be history. And we have an audience of, well, I don't want to lie, but I think it's a couple 100,000 a month listen to our podcast. It may be over 300,000 a month. So millions of people every year listen to our podcast.
Mm-hmm. The link to the Heartland Institute website will be provided in the description, so you viewing and listening can go to the website and familiarize yourself with more with the work that Heartland Institute as well as the Sterling and his team are doing. Thank you so much, Sterling. It was wonderful to get to know you and the great work Heartland Institute is doing.
Well, thanks for having me on, and please, if not me, keep us in mind if you ever need someone else to talk about a particular issue.
Mm-hmm. For you listening, if you enjoyed this conversation, please press like and share button, because this will show the YouTube algorithm and podcast algorithm that this conversation is important, that free market solutions can be an important tool for solving social and economic problems. Thank you, and see you in the next episode.